The vaccine rollout?
It's not a race. It's not a race. It's not a race.
But climate action, that is a race. And according to a new Climate Council report, we've pulled a hammy and we're about to get lapped by the field.
We've ranked 31 countries in the world on climate policy, emissions reduction and per capita emissions per unit of GDP, and Australia ranks last on that measure.
As for reliance on fossil fuels, both for export and domestic use,
Australia ranks equal last with Canada on that measure.
Now, this is the bit where a politician pipes up claiming it doesn't really matter because Australia only emits 1.3% of the world's emissions, so a net zero target would do absolutely nothing for the climate from here. But let's run those numbers again, this time including the emissions generated by Aussie fossil fuel exports.
Enhance.
Got an image enhancer that can bitmap?
Can you enhance him right here?
Can you enhance it?
Can you enhance it?
Just print the damn thing.
By Climate Council calculations, that lands us in the major leagues as the world's 5th biggest source of emissions. On the other hand,
find me a solar panel that works in the dark. I see a lot of scarves. If they're made out of acrylic, they come from the resources sector. I mean, seriously.
the 2050 net zero target would be a step in the right direction, and a deal is looking increasingly likely. But
if that's all we go to Glasgow with, we'll still be bottom of the pack.
And our lack of ambition could continue to generate dangerous ripple effects.
Australia's refusal to act is giving the world's biggest polluters the perfect excuse. They're saying, well, Australia isn't doing anything, so why should we?
Now, this is the bit where we ask, what would it take for us to finally show some urgency? I figured world-renowned climate scientist Michael Mann would know, so I spoke to him earlier. Michael Mann, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
What's it like, from your vantage point in Pennsylvania, peering into the Australian conversation about climate change?
Well, you know, here in the United States, we've had our own problems in the past when it comes to the politics of climate action. We had an administration, not long ago that actually declared climate change as a hoax created by the Chinese. So we know what it's like to encounter opposition to climate action at the highest level of our government. And I have some sympathy right now with Australians who are sort of dealing with that as well.
We've just seen this report putting Australia at the bottom of the pile of developed countries on performance and climate change action. One of the arguments you often hear in Australia is that, well, we emit a lot per capita, but we're such a small population that really in the overall scheme it doesn't matter. What do you think of that argument?
Well, we all have to do our role. And so I tend to think of, the role that we play as being sort of on a per capita basis. And Australia, sure, it has these fossil fuel resources that it has been able to extract and sell on the world market. But it's also one of the leaders when it comes to the natural energy resources. There's immense amounts of wind and sun. And so it really has an opportunity to be leading in the new energy industry. But we need to see more of a commitment. Right now, I think there's a 26 to 28% reduction by 2030. The United States, the EU, the UK have made far bolder pledges than that. We need to see Australia step up now.
Do you have any sympathy, though, for the Australian position? Like the countries that you mentioned, the UK, for example, very different to Australia, doesn't have a resources-based economy ever since Margaret Thatcher closed the coal mines. And so as a result of that, the idea of making these pledges probably brings with it less pain, or at least less fear, than it does in Australia.
Well, I think, Australia, you can look at Australia and see two different sides of Australia. I see the Australia that, has gone, very heavily towards renewables in, South Australia, where they're meeting a larger and larger fraction of their energy generation from renewable sources. Renewable energy is cheaper on a levelized basis, and it generates more jobs because most of the jobs in the fossil fuel industry now are basically automated. There are far more jobs when it comes to installation of new renewable energy sources. And so I think it's win-win.
The winds are kind of patchy, though, aren't they? I mean, there are parts of Australia where the entire town is built and has always been built on the coal industry. And so you can imagine that they would see any kind of winding down of coal as a genuine threat, not just to their wallets, but to their whole identity. Do you have a message for those sorts of communities that would actually be quite worried at watching this conversation?
I do. I live in the state of Pennsylvania. This is the state where oil was discovered in the United States. And it's a state that was really built on coal for well over a century. And, you know, I have students today in my classes who are from coal families. And one sympathizes, you know, this is how people made a living. They've tried to provide opportunities to their children, but you know, we're seeing a death spiral in coal in the United States right now. And so, you know, just as, you know, the Stone Age didn't end for want of stones, the fossil fuel age won't end for want of fossil fuels. It won't end because we've run out, but because we've found something, you know, something better. And those countries that get on board are going to be part of the great economic revolution of this century. And I would like to see my friends in Australia be part of that.
Michael, thanks so much for your time.
Oh, thank you.